Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to say something that a lot of people aren't necessarily going to like, and that's this focus many people have on, I need to do really slow eccentric reps, feels like basically just an excuse to train lazy, meaning the evidence for really slow eccentrics actually causing any additional muscle growth is pretty low. Plenty of the best bodybuilders around the world for the last 10, 20, 30, 50 years, 60 years, haven't particularly cared about these things. And this is the demographic that cares about muscle growth the most. And I'm not saying all people who train don't care about muscle, because they generally do, right? They generally do. But as far as eccentrics go and real world examples, it's relatively scarce. Right? And I've seen many people who focus excessively on eccentrics who are really under-muscled. They're really small. They don't get development from it. I mean, in a perfect example, everyone who's watched all my back work for the past 10 plus years, they're like, oh, you never control your eccentrics on your lat work. You're never going to build a big back. But you guys just saw my back there. Just kind of pointing out, I have never done slow eccentrics at all for my lat work, and yet my back is my biggest body part. So that's what I mean by examples of anecdote. And I'm obviously not the biggest or the strongest or the most jacked guy in the world by any means, and closing in on 50 years old. But for me personally, I have always found that my back grows extremely well if I don't care at all about the eccentrics. I don't put 1 second of thought into it. I just focus on the stretch and focus on getting stronger on my back exercises, whether it's weighted pull-ups, different rows with barbells, dumbbells, right? I just focus on my rep strength. And yet, my back has always grown extremely well. So again, you have to question where people get this from. And again, you watch many of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. And many of them didn't seem to care at all. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it doesn't seem to be correlated in any way with being a great bodybuilder. The scientific literature is relatively scarce, showing many benefits, particularly for really slow ones. Some of the stuff that looked at the slower ones found that if you go too slow, less muscle growth was caused. Okay? So think about that for a minute. Why do people have this idea? I think for a couple reasons. Number one, because slow eccentrics can make you really sore, right? They can make you really sore, much sorer than regular training. A lot of people then say, oh, so it must be doing something. But soreness in DOMS isn't associated necessarily with muscle growth either. So therein lay the problem. I think that's part of it. Number two, I think a lot of it has to do with people just trying to find ways to train lazier, because they're like, man, I just don't want to lift a heavy weight for a lot of reps. Right? I don't want to do that. That's hard work. So then they're like, if I just go slower, it forces me to use a much lighter weight, and then, which is fine. I mean, if you want to train strict to use a lighter weight, by all means. Right? Like notice here, obviously, on my incline benching. Soft touch, everything under control, I'm repping 225 with a wide grip, but still, fine. Control the weight. Controlling a weight and using stricter form is perfectly fine, but that's not what slow eccentrics are. Slow eccentrics force you to really go lighter, and you're missing a lot of the concentric benefits. Okay? And here's the other thing. A lot of stuff like that people start worrying about, they're like, well, it'll let me train further away from true failure. Well, that might be it, but not really. Because when you look at most of the literature we have, taking a joint or a muscle through a fairly long range of motion and training very close to muscle failure seems to start to eliminate a lot of these other factors. In other words, things like eccentric reps, perfect joint angles, some of the lengthened position discussion, they're really dependent upon the fact that you may not be training that hard. In that case, it might be the case of, well, we want to gain as much muscle as possible without training hard. So we'll just do more volume. We'll focus on these slow eccentrics. But once you start doing really hard sets, a lot of that nuance goes away, doesn't it? Because it is mechanical tension and fatigue that create hypertrophy. This is what stimulates growth. Right? And mechanical tension increases through two ways. Either adding weight, putting a joint angle where the muscle gets more tension, so let's say the very bottom of a bench press, right? The very bottom of a curl, so on. In other words, when you place the muscle into a lengthened position, that oftentimes, depending on the movement, not always, increases tension on the muscle. Anytime you add weight while using the same form, you increase tension on the muscle on a rep-for-rep basis. Training closer to failure puts more tension on individual muscle fibers. Okay? In other words, the harder you train on a set, the more tension gets put on each individual muscle fiber. Because other fibers get fatigued, and therefore the other ones have to take over. And that is really what we're looking at. That's why fatigue creates hypertrophy, right? Because it is forcing you to put more tension. Each individual muscle fiber has to take more weight because other ones get too tired to keep contracting, and you go to newer ones until you get to everything. Okay, it is that tension placed on the muscle fiber that causes hypertrophy. All right. So when you start looking at it from that perspective, people will say, well, so how come your back got so big, without caring about eccentrics at all? And I would make the case that because I did a heavy weight for a lot of reps. Ooh. I focused on progressive overload and getting stronger at rep work. Most of my back work is, up in the 6 to 12 rep range. Sometimes higher. I've done sets of 15 and stuff also. But that's it. Doing hard, challenging sets like you watch this set here. Pretty much this set was to failure. All right, I'm doing an underhand grip row, a Yates row with 225. Took it to failure. All right, that will build a big back. It's very straightforward. Why would eccentrics even matter at that point? The only purpose people are trying to do the slow eccentric is hoping to create more fatigue. But you know what creates more fatigue? Doing more reps, adding more weight to the bar, getting stronger at your rep work. That'll do it also. But again, that's work. Just slowing down an eccentric isn't really work, is it? Not really. Not really working harder. So again, it's one of those things that I really don't think actually matters at the end of the day. It really doesn't. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.